Every time I would see a different movie, I would want to have a different career. And my better idea was if I had my own publication and created my own job, then I wouldn't have to leave the city.
Wow.
If I owned my own magazine, nobody could edit me. If I wanted it to say the way it was, then it would be the exact way it was. I phoned for 4.5 days,
Oh,
called with his last name, until finally on the 4.5 day, I found his mom, Louise. I went to his house that night, and that very night, he showed me the internet for the very first time. I'd never seen it before. And I was like, will it work like this? Will it work like that? You need to build a business like that, where you don't have to take care of it all the time. It just sits there and it makes money for you. The ones that actually are going to succeed are the ones who are going to love that thing that they do, what they started in the beginning, but they're going to realize that their real job is to become the greatest salesperson in the history of the company. Every business has a combination of timing and luck that is involved in the business's journey. Pretty much every entrepreneur I've ever spent time with will eventually tell you that, yeah, there was this moment where by complete fluke, I met this one person in a restaurant, or by complete fluke, this happened at this moment in time. Or, man, if it was 2 years later, that opportunity wouldn't have been open. The most fun part of every month that I would look forward to more than anything was going to Schulich to talk with the students.
Today we have Krish with us. Chris is a visionary entrepreneur and mentor. He has co-founded Thin Data, Canada's largest email service provider. Currently, he leads the Schulich startup community, empowering next generation of innovators. With over 2 decades of experiences, he's driving force in building and scaling successful ventures. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Wonderful. So this is how we go, a free flow of information, right? Catered towards your journey here. And we would like to know from the beginning where it all started. I know I did a bit of my research. I know you started as you studied journalism, right? And then you built on the first company. Walk us through your entire journey of you being a student and then building a first company.
Well, if we go back to my high school days, it's very interesting. Very quickly, it was always interested in the next idea and exploring many different types of careers.
Wow.
And so every time I would see a different movie, I would want to have a different career back when I was in high school. And a couple of the highlights from that were that I saw Indiana Jones and I wanted to be an archaeologist. And for a year, I wanted to be an archaeologist. Then I saw Jaws and I wanted to be a marine biologist and study sharks. And then after that, then I watched a movie called All the President's Men, which is the inside story of the Richard Nixon scandal, Watergate, as the president of the United States. And that was all about two journalists that were played by Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. And so then I decided I wanted to be a journalist. So this is the last movie I saw that made me want to become a journalist. I went off to journalism school. And when I graduated, I really loved it. I enjoyed it. I was studying to be a television broadcaster. But when I graduated, I quickly found out that this is back in 1994-ish. So back in 1994, there weren't a lot of jobs that were available in media. Even then, the transformation was already starting to begin and the pressure on the media landscape. So people told me I would need to leave my home city here, Toronto, and go to another area of the country and kind of work my way back. And it might take me 15 years to get back to my hometown. I decided maybe I have a better idea. And my better idea was if I had my own publication and created my own job, then I wouldn't have to leave the city.
Wow.
And on top of that, when I was a writer, and I wrote for at times freelance for different local or national publications, I really didn't like being edited. I always thought the way I wrote it was the way I wanted it, and I wish it would be that way. But then the editors would come in and change everything. So being young and all full of fire, I was and if I owned my own magazine, nobody could edit me. If I wanted it to say the way it was, then it would be the exact way it was. So you can see a little bit of that fiery spark of the entrepreneur who's I want to do it my way. I don't want people to tell me what to do. I want to build my own thing and I want to control my own destiny. So that was the beginning of the spark of me deciding that I was going to create my own company. And so the very first company that I created back before Thin Data was an online magazine. Now, in
Hmm.
1995, not a lot of people were creating publications with no paper.
Hmm.
So this was a very radical notion to be going down this path, and that's where it all began. So, I
Wow.
can build on that, but I'll turn it back to you for your next
Yeah,
question.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Uh, Now this is pretty interesting because I believe internet was quite new then, right? I mean,
Very early stages of commercialization, right? Now,
right.
people were just starting to read about it and hear about it, and back then it was referred to as the information superhighway, is what they
Hmm.
called it. No, that
So
was what it referred to.
now this brings me to one question, Chris. Like now we are in phase where AI is still developing, right? A lot of us are early adopters of AI. Now, back in 1995, internet was quite new. I just want to relate your journey here. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, how did the idea came in? I mean, I know you touched upon it.
It's a good
Like,
question. So what I would say to students that are out there, and emerging leaders that are watching the
right.
podcast, is that you should always listen to the people that are in class around you who have
Hmm,
like radical ideas, different ideas, are
hmm,
proposing interesting things. So back then, I was in my working at one of these publications, a paper-based publication, and there was this one person who worked at the publication. He was my age, same kind of age group, and
okay.
he was always walking around the publication and he was saying, one day, his name was Chancellor, and Chancellor was always walking around the publication saying, one day, we're not going to need any paper anymore. We
Hmm,
won't be having to send this thing to the printer. We're going to publish it straight off our computers, and it's all going to go onto this thing called the internet. And so the writers at the paper, he wasn't a writer, he was more of like the technical guy and like
hmm,
producing the pages and getting everything ready to go to the printer. The writers were like, whatever, kind of like we like the ink on our hands. We like the idea of handing it out to people, that it's a physical product. But Chancellor was like, telling us one day that's not going to be the case.
hmm,
So as I decided I was going to create my own magazine, then I had to go get the quotes for the to print it.
right.
And when I went and got the quotes to print it, now remember I'm in my very early 20s at this point.
Hmm,
So all the money I had saved up in the world from all my part-time jobs as a young person, as a teenager,
hmm,
and also a little bit of money that my grandfather had left behind when he passed away,
hmm.
I had $10,000, like $10 or $12,000. It was everything I
Wow.
had in the whole world,
Hmm,
and I went and got the quote to run an issue of my magazine, and the quote that I got back for paper was going to take all the money that I had for
hmm.
one issue, and it wasn't a lot of copies either. I would have gone and handed them out down at the downtown at one of the big downtown corners, and I would have handed them out in the afternoon, and they would have all been gone. So I was like, this can't work. That's not possible. Like, I'll be out of money. I'll be wiped out. But
Right.
then, because I'd been listening, I was like, what was that guy Chancellor talking about how we're not going to need any paper. If
Hmm,
I don't need the paper, then this bill from the printer goes away.
right.
And if I don't have the bill from the printer, I could actually make a go of this business.
Hmm,
But I didn't. I hadn't stayed connected to Chancellor. And if you again rewind back to that time, back to
hmm,
1994, 95, then there's no LinkedIn,
hmm.
there's no Facebook, there's no Instagram.
Right.
Most people do not have email accounts at this point. I know I certainly didn't have one at that point.
Hmm,
And very, very few people are walking around with mobile phones. We're
hmm.
still using payphones when we're calling our parents
Right.
when we're coming back down the road from university to our hometown. So, um, how to find this person? Because he's gone on in his life, I've gone on in my life. The publication we were at doesn't exist anymore at that point. And now I'm like, I got to find that guy. So I sat with the phone book, the old school phone book that listed everybody's phone numbers in the whole city. And
Wow.
I phoned for 4.5 days,
Oh my
called
God.
people with his last name, until finally on the fourth and a half day, I found his mom, Louise.
Wow.
And I always joke with my students that I wish that she had been named Anne or Abigail, because then I would have found her on the first day. But instead, she was
Right.
buried in the L. So it'd take me 4 days of calling, and I would pick up the phone and be like, "Hi, my name's Chris. I'm looking for this guy. He's a Crawford. His first name's Chancellor Crawford. Um, he's techie. He's super smart. He's like 6'7". He used to have a mohawk. Do you know him? Are you related to him? And they would hang up on me, kind of thing, or
Okay.
they would chat me for a second. But eventually, in the L's, I found his mom, and she said, "Yeah, he's here. I'll put him on the phone for you." And she put him on the phone, and he lived with her. That's why I couldn't find him in the phone book, and
Mm.
he was using her phone. So put him on the phone. I went to his house that night, and that very night, he showed me the internet for the very first time. I'd never seen it before, and I was like, "Can you? Will it work like this? Will it work like that? Will this?" He's like, "Yeah, eventually that'll happen. This will happen." And I'm like, Do you build these things? Do you know how to build these web pages?"
Mm.
He's like, "Yeah, I can do that." He's like, "I'll show you a bunch of them that I built for myself." And I was like, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We'll go into business together, 50-50, and you do all the building and the tech and the production, and I'll go get the writers and I'll sell the advertising, and
Mm.
we'll make a magazine." And that's how
Wow.
my entrepreneurial career started out.
Amazing, amazing. It's like, no, I mean, first the zeal of doing it, like sitting down for 4 days will take a lot of patience for someone in early 20s, right? And it shows that kind of zeal you had to build something of your own, right? And because usually what happens once you get a first setback, you're like, oh, this is not for me. But this shows the zeal. I mean, for sure.
That's
Great, great.
part
So,
of what, like, when people ask me, like, nowadays, what was it that you learned from being a journalist
hmm,
and being a journalism student that actually you applied to business? And so, very much when you're building a company or when you're pursuing your career, you need to be willing to do research. You need to sit down and dig and find and like go,
hmm,
the answer is here somewhere. And that's what the process of being a journalist is. You don't know the answer, you're going to
right.
dig, you're going to find, you're going to explore, and you're not going to give up until you get the answer.
Got it. So now coming down to your business journey. Now you have a partner, right? You have a web platform. So how did you went on to build a product which can help people, right? And who are the early adopters where you found that these are the people who are willing to pay for it?
Right. Well, I know, like, one of the things that you talk about here as part of the Next Grad Show is often about, like, mentorship and mentors and key people who, like,
Right.
support you on your journey. So I had two very early mentors that told me, like, I say actually three, but like, I'm going to tell you what each of them said, and you'll see how this all comes together. The first mentor was showing me, I was like helping him out with a project as the magazine was building. We started taking projects on the side, building websites for people as well too,
Hmm.
because they would hire us to do the websites. And so this individual, he had many businesses all throughout the city. And one day
Hmm.
he called me up and said, "Hey, Chris, I want to show you and teach you something." His name was Alan Barkin, and he was like, "I want to teach you about my favorite company that I own."
Hmm.
Right? And so I said, "Okay." He said, "Come to this address on Thursday at this time." So I went there. I pulled up in my car and I got there, and then so he said, "Let's go out to the back to the parking lot." So we went out to the parking lot at this building that he owned, and he walked up, and there's this giant steel pole that goes up into the sky,
Okay.
and at the top of the giant steel pole is a sign, right, with advertising on it that overlooks the highway.
Hmm.
And he kicks the pole, he kicks the pole, and he says, "Chris, do you see this sign? I make $50,000 a month from this sign because of where it is. And I don't have to do anything except show up once a month and kick the pole. You need to build a business like that where you don't have to like take care of it all the time. It just sits there and it makes money for you. Go build something like that." So that was like an important piece of the conversation, because at that
Hmm.
point we were building the magazine, we were building like websites, we were doing all these different things, and that took a lot of time and a lot of energy. Your limiting factor is the amount of hours in the day that we had to be able to do the work.
Hmm.
The second great piece of advice that I got was from another entrepreneur, lawyer, politician, guy who was super talented at many things. His name's Tim Murphy.
Okay.
And he sat down with me and we had coffee, and he said, "Chris, one thing I've learned over the years is that the biggest opportunity that you ever have will not necessarily be the first business that you are creating. It will
Hmm.
be the opportunity that walks in front of you while you are doing the first business. So you'll be focused." He says, "Many people are focused on the main business that they're doing,
Right.
and then years later they say, 'Oh, I should have built this other thing because I realized that was a problem, a thing I needed. That was bigger than the thing I was building.
Hmm.
But some people will actually have their eyes open and they'll see the thing that will cross their path. So he said, keep your eyes open and see the thing.
Right.
And then the third thing was the third piece of advice from a key mentor was that he was actually coaching young businesses in the city. And he said,
Hmm.
Chris, something I need you to think about is that 90% of the businesses that I've ever coached, as part of this incubator he was with, go out of business, and 10% of them succeed. And he goes, there's one factor between all the ones that succeed versus all the ones that don't. And there may be multiple reasons why they did or didn't succeed, but there's one thing that is true about all the ones that succeeded and all the ones that failed. And he said, the ones that fail tell themselves that they are there and going to enjoy the experience of like creating the food product or creating the piece of hardware or creating the service business or working in it or writing or whatever you're doing as part of your business.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that actually are going to succeed are the ones who are going to love that thing that they do, what they started in the beginning, but they're going to realize that their real job is to become the greatest salesperson in the history of the company. Because you have to like bring the customers, you have to bring the people, you have to bring investors, you have to convince the bank, you have to convince people to join the company, you have to, unless you can develop that skill set, then it's great that you made the greatest muffin or cake or whatever in the world. But if you can't actually embrace the part of you that has to actually tell that story and win people over and charm people when they walk in the door, then you're not gonna succeed.
Right.
So as I continued on, those things were all in my head and all things I was like working with and open-minded to and experimenting with.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were building the magazine, we eventually were able to sell the magazine to the sports radio network in Canada called The
Wow.
Fan. We were able to like continue to concentrate on the web development business. But one day I suddenly get like an email, a phone call, a knock on the door,
Mm-hmm.
which is from one of my clients that I'm building websites for. And they
Okay.
say, Chris, we're wondering if you could recommend a really great email marketing platform to work
Hmm.
with, because we need that to be able to communicate to our customers. Do you know which ones you would prefer, which ones you would recommend, have the best pricing type of thing? I said, no, I don't really. That's not really the business that we're in. But like, if I see something, I'll let you know. Then maybe like a week later, knock, 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 phone call, email. Hey, Chris, we were wondering if you know a good email marketing platform that you could recommend. And another one, and another one. And before long,
Hmm.
like, 7, 8 people asked me the same question. So my partner and I, Chancellor, we decided we better go investigate this and we better go find out what is out there, what do we think. And
Hmm.
we did a review and we found which were the platforms we liked, what we thought they were missing, was the pricing reasonable or not, what kind of thing. And then we said maybe we should build this on our own. Because remember the lesson of the guy who kicked the pole, right? Like if
Hmm.
the email system is sending out the email all overnight, or broadcasting and doing its thing, we'll be making money and it won't be attached to our time.
Right.
And what the other mentor said was, this is a moment where a business walks across in front of you. There's people knocking on the door, they're trying to buy something,
Hmm.
but you're not selling it, but they're asking you because they think they value your opinion.
Right.
So in that case, what we did was we took one engineer who worked for us. His name was Mehul Joshi. He was a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
And we took him and we put him in a room. And nowadays, of course, when we're working with companies here through Schulich and all the places that you can get support in the accelerators, there's
Mm-hmm.
very detailed like product methodologies and
Right.
whole playbooks in terms of how the product's all going to be built. But back then, we just took one guy, put him in a room, told everybody else, you're not allowed to talk to him
Okay.
because we can't distract him with the web work. We need him to work on this product we're going to build. And the room we put him in had a giant, giant whiteboard. And Chancellor and I went on the whiteboard and just started drawing like how the platform was going to work. and an email will go like this, and then a report will come back like this, and then these are the things that it will be able to tell us, and da 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 da. And we're going to need to, and it just became a giant picture on the wall. And then we had to work on keeping the main company going.
Right.
So we
The
just
previous
say, well,
company.
that would be the main, yeah, the main company was still the web company.
The web company,
So
right.
we would just say to them like, okay, we'll see you at 5 o'clock. We'll come back in and see how far you got. And that's it. That was like, true agile was like the two owners leave you in a room. You got to code all day long. And then you come back in and you're like, how's it going? Right. What questions do you have? Did you run into problems? Like, we had more ideas. Do you want to hear? We'll write them on the board, you kind of thing. And we did that. And that's how we built the very first version of the email marketing platform. And how the transition started to happen. We'll continue the conversation along the
Right.
journey together, but that's the beginning of us understanding we were going to move into product.
Right. So now, here the thing, like now you had the web development business, you're building it for the clients, and now you saw the email opportunity, right? Email marketing opportunity, advertisement opportunity, and now basically you're making a slow transition. Now we call it as making a pivot. A lot of companies currently, they face issues in making a pivot because they believe that they are into the hardcore business and they're going to make it run, right? And eventually they're going to kind of dried up. They dry up and like have to close the door. So this is the lesson for all our viewers as well. I mean, keep looking for it and do not hesitate to make a transition if that is necessary and if you believe that can make a bigger business out of it. So
That's right. And another mentor, right? Then I had an opportunity where, um, you know, one thing I'll just throw in here for your viewers and listeners is that um, one thing we've always, me and my business partner, were always brave about doing and continue in my life to be brave about doing is like reaching out to people who are like more successful further down the road, have accomplished more in different areas or categories than I have or that he has. And we would like reach out and just like find ways to connect with them. And we found really creative ways to connect with people. So, for example, one of my salespeople one time came to me and she says like I came up with this really cool idea for how we can meet like really famous people and powerful business people. I'm like, okay, what is it? She said, I think we should volunteer at charitable fundraising events that have a red carpet, and then we should go sign up, and we should sign up and volunteer to be the people who walk the business people and the celebrities, walk them down the red carpet to their table for the dinner. And while we're
very
walking them to their
innovative.
table, they will ask us what we're doing and are we studying or
Got it.
what are we doing in life. And then when they ask us that, then we pitch them on the company and we tell
Wow.
them what we do, and we'll find customers and we'll get faster to CEOs than any other thing that we could do in terms of trying to find people. So I was like, okay, sure, let's try it. Sounds fun. So
Got
we
it.
went, and literally the very first time we did it, we picked up a huge client that night,
Mm.
and she was walking down the red carpet, and she pitched him on the company and what it could do to transform his business. And by Monday, we had like his whole senior team in a boardroom, and we're meeting with him. So we always found creative ways to meet people and get in front of people. Now the next part about the pivot that I'm going to explain, the mentorship that I got.
Mhm.
One day, one of my senior team members, his name's Wayne Kerrigan, he comes back to the office. He goes, Chris, I just went to this event and I just watched like the smartest person that I've ever seen in my life. And we have to meet him. And I'm like, okay, what's his name? His name's David Pico.
Okay.
He's the head, he's since passed away, but he was the head of the Boston Consulting Group in Canada.
Wow.
And of course, BCG is like you like just to be a consultant in BCG, you have to be
Mm.
smart.
Very
But to
smart.
be the
Like
head of a country, you have to be like big brain, right? Like
big brain,
really
right?
smart, and you have to be like really like able to like work with people and like sell and understand. And he was advising like senior political leaders, CEOs of the biggest companies in the country, and like
Mm.
billing rate would have been thousands of dollars per hour to have time with him.
Wow.
So we were like, how are we going to meet with him? Well, we found out that he was working on a particular nonprofit charitable mission that he was on.
Hmm.
So we went and volunteered to join the committee, and then we were in the room with him in all the committee meetings, and then we donated our technology, our email platform, to the project. helped out like 4 months or so.
Okay.
And then one day after a committee meeting, I said to him, "Hey, Mr. Pico, we're just about to start the process of like trying to figure out how to raise some money. We're pivoting the company. We're trying to figure all this out. Could I chat with you for a few minutes?" And he walked me to his office, and I thought, okay, we're going to sit down. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get like 15 minutes and he'll give me like one piece of advice, right? Instead, he opens up his calendar and he says, October 14th, Saturday afternoon, this is in like 2 weeks from now,
Mm-hmm.
I want you to come to my house in Rosedale, in one of the wealthier neighborhoods in the city. I want you to come to my house in Rosedale, and I'm going to give you 6 hours, and we're going to sit down, and you're going to present the business to me, and we're going to figure out some of the key next steps.
Wow. Amazing.
Whoa, right? Like, wow. So I was like, okay. At that point, we didn't have a written business plan. We had no financial projections. We're just building as we're building it.
Right.
So we had to go back and prepare, and then we met with them, and we sat down, and in that meeting, he gave us the, probably three of the most important kind of like decisions that we needed to make about the business. I'm going to tell you the one and why it was so important. And this is all
Mm-hmm.
about the pivot, all about the pivot.
Okay.
He said, I want you to release all the web development clients from their contracts. So just
Okay.
sit with that for a minute. We had $2 million of really steady web development revenue coming in every year. We had a small team,
Right.
but we had a tiny little email thing. It was only $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
He wants us to give away, just release all of the web contracts and just go to the $100,000 for the email. And we were like, whoa, I mean, like, Mr. Pico, that's pretty intense. Like, we'd be giving away all our revenue.
Right.
Can we sell it? Like, can we sell the business? And he's like, nope. I'm like, well, why not? He's like, if you sell the business, you'll be spending all your time going to find a buyer. You'll
Mm-hmm.
be spending your time negotiating with the buyer. You'll be spending your time transitioning the clients, doing the
Wow.
legal, doing all the work. You're going to this is going to take you a full year at least,
Hmm.
if not a year and a half, if not two, to go through the process of the sale. And the money you'll get from the sale would pale in comparison to doing that $100,000 thing and building that. Okay. So he's like, listen, if you don't believe me that you need to get rid of all the web clients, I want you to do this. I want you to go back to your office,
Hmm.
and I want you to make an activity log, and I want you to give it to pick out of the company. And at this point we were maybe 27, 30 people or something.
Okay.
So he's like, I want you to make a list of the 15 people who are
Mm-hmm.
the most important people. Like, if you could only keep 15 people in the company,
Okay.
who would you keep?
Hmm.
Make that list, and then I want you and those 15 people for the next 2 weeks to track every hour that is spent on the web business and every hour that you spend on the email business that
Email
you've
business.
already told me is the future of the company.
Hmm.
So we did that for 2 weeks. And what percentage of our time do you think we were spending on the thing that was the future of the company versus what percentage of our time were we dealing with problems, issues, things happening inside of the traditional business, the original?
What I can think is like around 60-40, 60 in your traditional company. No, is it 50-50? 50-50?
We were only spending 10% of our time. Like, when we were forced to face the real reality, not what we were telling ourselves. Like, oh no, we're doing both at the same time. When we were actually had to record it, and not just me, but all the top 15 people, all recording their time, they were only spending 10% of their time
Hmm.
working on the thing that was the future. And they were spending 90% of their time maintaining a thing that was the past. So when we did that, then we decided, okay, we're going to give away. So this was one of the boldest and most intense decisions we ever had to make. We contacted all the clients and said, you've got 8 months to leave. Okay, we're out of the business in 8 months. We are no longer in the business of web development. We are not in the business of maintaining your websites. We're not going to host them. You have 8 months warning to get out of the building, because when that time comes, we're shutting everything off.
Wow.
And we love you, we appreciate you. You can stay to the last day if you want to, but once that day comes, whoosh, everything's off, and then you're going to have to go. And we also gave them a couple names of other companies that were our competitors, that you could call our competitors and you could leave and go to our competitors, right? And then announce to the company that this was the decision we had made, and we all needed to very much start to work on the new business, the email business, because in 8 months there'd be no money left, there'd be no revenue in the business, and we hadn't raised any money. So it was all just going to be like an on the fly hard pivot transition from like a stable business that was making money to $100,000 business that we had just started in, and everybody rallied around that. We didn't lose a single team member, and that business went from $100,000 to being like a recurring revenue business of $6.7 million within the next 3 or 4 years.
Wow. I mean, if I've processed it well, so you have a web development company, you're making like 2 million ARR annual revenue. Now you see something new, that is email marketing, email advertisement, right? And now you meet this guy, huge guy from BCG. He asks you to completely eliminate your traditional business you've been building on. You've had the expertise for so long,
Mm-hmm.
right? This will take a lot of courage, and this is really scary. I mean, just to listen this, I mean, I feel that no, it would have taken so much of boldness to actually do that, right? I mean, what if it doesn't work? I mean, like, what if it is just a fad,
It
right?
would
I
all be
mean,
gone.
right? I mean, you
Yeah.
have wiped out all your clients, I mean, who will never come back, right? Saying that you have made a, exit from the business, they're never going to come back. And I can imagine the scenario must have gone to. But again, a very
We're
bold
like
move.
we're like in business, all all entrepreneurs will be faced with moments where they have to make, like, that's one type of decision that we made, but
Hmm.
you're going to be faced with moments where you have to make very like intense decisions that are like, can lead to like the moon, or can lead to like, being in the dust.
Hmm.
So you have to get comfortable with those decisions. You can't be reckless with them. Like, when I tell you the story, the thing to take away from it as well is that I reflected on it. I went back. I like talked to the staff. We did our activity logs. We talked about it as a senior team.
Hmm.
I communicated professionally with the clients. Like, I communicated with the staff. I didn't
Hmm.
hide the decision from them. I included them in it. So it's a very like, it's like decisions that happen that are bold,
Hmm.
but also they have a lot of like calm reflection in them as well at the same time, right? And then you have to know, okay, this is the moment, like I can sit and I can be cautious,
Hmm.
and I can, wind up having like, two smaller versions of two businesses running at the same time, or I'm going to have to decide like which
Right.
which which horse am I betting on here, and I'm going to have to make my bet, and then I'm going to have to live with it. And the other thing about making a decision of that that intensity and announcing it to the whole company is, now you have no choice. You have to make it come true. There's no, before it was safe, right? Like if the email kind of grew a little bit, but it
Right.
didn't, but we can all go home and we can pay our mortgage and we can like, feed ourselves and everything is like fine. But now it's like, no, like there's no version of this where this is we are not going to make this come true,
Right.
because the not version is not acceptable to
Right.
anybody, and
Because there was no
everybody got on board and did it.
there was no going back, for sure.
There's no going back.
Right. So later on, you got acquired as well, right?
Hmm.
If you can talk about that to us as well, like now how acquisition happened, and what do you believe, like you did one right thing that now you got acquired. I mean, things got into acquisition phase, and post that, if you can also talk to Talk to us about that. Like what happened
Sure.
after your acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, when I was in the at the kitchen table of David Pico and we were having that conversation, he was such a brilliant man. He even named the acquirer at the kitchen table. He said, "And this, if you do this, this is who I think will buy you." Now, um, with
Very interesting.
all people who are like are brilliant at that level are playing, we've all familiar with the expression playing like 4D chess, right? So they've got like things that are going on all kinds of levels that you can't even see at the table. So
Right.
like what he knew when he predicted like who would buy the company was that one of his clients was a major organization who he had already thought, oh,
Hmm.
if this existed, these guys will buy these guys, right? So he already had like knew how the whole thing would come together. Now, in the end, the company that bought us was not the company that he had predicted at the kitchen table,
Hmm.
but it was the biggest public competitor of the company he had predicted at the kitchen table. So
Wow.
he was right that one company would have bought us for sure that he had predicted, but the bigger public company did not want us to fall into the hands of the first
The
company, and so
competitor.
they came in and they actually bid double what the first company
Wow.
was would have been willing to pay for the business.
Right.
So and in terms of coming to that decision and finding that path, what's also interesting is that I had my eye as well on which were some of the companies that might be interested in buying us.
Hmm.
And we had another decision to make. Sometimes you make a decision to charge forward, and sometimes you might make a decision that is a decision to take a step more down or sideways, or make a decision to like sell the business or that type of thing. So in my case, people often ask like, well, why did you sell the company? And
Right.
for us, I looked in a little bit into the future of the email marketing space, and if
Hmm.
anyone who's watching has followed it since then, a lot of the companies got bought up by a company called Exact Target, which then became Salesforce, and there were a bunch of giants, right?
Right.
Adobe eventually became a big email marketing player. So eventually, it was going to become a bunch of like major companies. Well, this one company, Exact Target, based out of Indianapolis, had announced one day that they had raised $100 million US.
Mm.
Now, these days, $100 million US raise is I mean it's like still huge,
It's still
but
huge.
it's
Right.
still you can read enough announcements about that. But back when that was the case, that was literally like a shocking moment. That was like a whoa.
Wow.
That was if you were in Canada at that point in time,
Hmm.
right? Which is now that would have been like we'll say maybe 2005, 2006. So if you read that in Canada at that time, there was literally nowhere that you could reasonably know where in Canada you could go get that money, right?
Mm.
Like the level of like the ecosystem of venture capital firms and leaders that are here now, the connections into the states, the accelerators, the government programs, like none of that had been set up yet. So when you read that, it's like, and so what I thought was Exact Target is going to go and they're going to go wipe out most of the other email companies in the United States. And then in maybe 2 or 3 years, when they've accomplished that, they're going to come over the border to Canada and they're going to like really take a run at me. Right.
Mm.
And I'm like, that'll be tough to fight them off like with $100 million, investment bankroll behind them. So that's kind of the moment where I was like, I think I should start looking to see where the path to sell the business could be. Many of our competitors, either through us out competing them in the country, either wound up in bankruptcy protection because I went after them and like took their clients off them inside the market, but also the ones that hung around too long did eventually get wiped out by the Salesforces and the Adobes, and they were just too big to compete with at that point in time. So I think me and my team accurately kind of looked a little into the future, and we're like, we got to make a choice. Either we got to try and go big, or we got to like make a decision that there's a path to sell in the next couple of years, and
Wow.
that's the decision.
Wow. Perfect. Thank you for that answer. I really love numbers. So basically, if you can put in a bit emphasis on it, like you were at ARR 6.7 million before you got acquired, right? What was the deal? What was the deal number? How much did you get post acquisition?
So we were at 6.7 million ARR, and we had, we were constantly reinvesting in the business. So I
Hmm.
think we were at, our EBITDA was just over a million, like 1.2 million or something like
Okay,
that.
got it.
And the deal was for just under 20 million
Hmm.
cash.
Fair enough. I
And
mean,
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah,
Wonderful,
yeah.
wonderful.
So it was for us, it was a good deal, the right time, and that was the choice. Was like, okay, well, if we raise a bunch of money, we're going to be like, like we're going to hand over a big block of the business to
Right.
investors, or we own most of the business and we can sell it at this price, or we can. And we had to like figure out what was happening in the competitive landscape. So you take all those factors into account, and then figure out if that's the right choice. Now,
Got
like
it.
looking back, I'm very like happy with like, you know, um, the things that came next, the opportunities that came next in life for me. And I love like teaching, and I love working at the university and building out all the programs here.
Wow.
Every once in a while, though, I do think like, maybe I should have kept it. Maybe I should have gone further. Maybe I should have pushed it further along.
Right.
But it was a decision. That same decision that if I had held on to it,
Hmm.
that some of the other companies that decided to hold on in Canada, they wound up gone. They didn't get sold. They didn't get sold for anything. They were
Got it.
wiped out eventually.
Got it.
So you'll never know, and you can't live with regrets about these things. You make the
Right.
best decision you can, and then you move on.
A lot of people keep thinking about it but don't go and actually go and do it. I mean, we remember the case of Yahoo and Google, right? I mean, later
Hmm.
Google became big business. So
Hmm.
great, awesome. So I mean, then you post acquisition you made an exit from your company, right? uh,
Hmm.
just one question before we move to your next stint, that is Schulich. I made a bit research on it. uh, just one question, Chris. Do you believe that timing was one of the plus point for you, that you started early on in 1995 when email was introduced, right? You took right decision at the right time. Do you believe that timing was also one of the factor for your continuous success?
Yeah, I think that every business has a combination of timing and luck
Hmm.
that is involved in the business's journey. So if you're watching somebody and they're, in a story about their entrepreneurial journey, and they're telling you, and then I made that decision and that decision and that was perfect and that was right. I don't believe any of that. I believe that like, yes, they're smart. Yes, they like were aggressive or determined at the right points in time. But pretty much every entrepreneur I've ever spent time with will eventually tell you that, yeah, there was this moment where by complete fluke I met this one person in a restaurant,
Hmm.
or by complete fluke this happened at this moment in time, or man, if it was 2 years later, that opportunity wouldn't have been open. Now
Hmm.
the entrepreneur's job is to like see those windows and capitalize on them.
Got it.
So timing and luck, it's not like it just happens to you, right?
Hmm.
But timing and luck combined with an entrepreneur's capacity to recognize the moment, that's what creates possibility and what
Got it.
creates amazing
Got it.
things.
Amazing. I mean, how did Schulich happen to you? I mean, I know you were a hardcore entrepreneur, got your company acquired, now you made an exit, right? And I saw that you started as a guest professor in Schulich, right?
Hmm.
Eventually, how did, I mean, you went on to build that startup community around? Because while I was in Schulich, I was keep hearing about the startup community. I mean, that was taking a lot of spotlight back then, right? So I really wanted to know, like, how did that happen? I mean, like, how did that community you have created right now, and like you heading it, and that we see that it is creating a lot of buzz on the internet now. That the startup community, the Schulich startup community. So how did that happen?
It's really interesting how all these things are connected and intertwined, right? So now I'm going to go back again. Remember that moment where my friend and teammate Wayne came in and said, I met this guy, David Pico, right?
Right.
And then we went and volunteered for David Pico. And then he gave us the advice and these amazing things happened. Okay, so well, while we were meeting David Pico,
Mm-hmm.
we also met a person who is like his right hand at the Boston Consulting Group at the time.
Right.
And when he passed away, the person who took over the Boston Consulting Group, she's an amazing, dynamic nonprofit leader now in Canada, many different things she's done. And her name's Julia Deans.
Okay.
Okay. So Julia Deans has watched the work that I've done, watched
Mm-hmm.
the company, and we did some things to help her out over the years.
Okay.
And now I've left the company, I've moved on, sold the business, worked there for 2 years within the
Mm-hmm.
bigger company and moved on. And one day during dinner, Julia Deans, sitting there with her husband, Graham Deans, an award-winning Schulich professor, he says to her, I need some people to come in and talk about selling their company in my mergers and acquisitions class at Schulich. And she says to him, oh, I know a guy. His name's Chris. You should have him come in and talk. I think the students would really like him. So Graham gets introduced to me by his wife, Julia, who I met through David Pico, who we did volunteer work for because we were
Right.
looking to meet him for the company. And I go into Graham Dean's class and I tell the story of selling the business, the highs, the lows, the ups and downs, the challenges, some, challenges with like after selling the company, like the depression of like, this was my baby, this is my thing I created
Right.
from out of the air and now it's
Right.
gone and now like what am I going to do next kind of thing. And Graham invites me to come in to have that, presentation and spend time with the class. And I left and I was like, that was fun. I really liked that. That was cool.
Mm.
I just go back working on other projects, working on other things. He invites me again the next term and I come in and I love it again. And then one day the head of the Schulich Career Design Center, Rob Hines, asks a few of the professors, hey, a lot of the students seem like, now this is like 9 years ago or so. They say a lot of the students seem to be coming now and asking us about creating their own job by starting a company, not coming to the career center about getting hired in a job.
Mm.
And he asked some of those professors, does anybody know someone who could come in to the career center once a month and coach the students who
Wow.
want to create their own business? And Graham Dean says, well, there's this guy who comes to my class every term and his name's Chris and he built and sold his company and he's got a lot of great stories and he's like, the students seem to love him. So you should talk to him. So Rob Hines, I should say, Rob Hines calls me up and takes me to breakfast. And I thought I was just going to give him advice on what would I do. Like if I was building a startup program for a school, what would I do? And at the end of the meeting, he says, all right, I'll send you some paperwork. When can you start? And it was only me just coming in like once a month at that point to actually come in and do the coaching. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds fun. And I started coming up once a month and bringing some of my friends with me. And we would like take over the career center at night when everybody had gone home. And we would like fill all the offices. And then the students could meet with us and talk about their business ideas and what they wanted to do. As I did that, it was only once a month. But then the most fun part of every month that I would look forward to more than anything was going to Schulich
Okay.
to talk with the students. And then I started thinking, this would be cool if this was like my job, if this was my thing that I did, if I actually like built this and I had all kinds of ideas as to what we could do with it. And I've been talking with students. And so then I went one day to my family and my friends and I told them, I'm setting aside all these other projects and this one company that I was working on building with a friend. And I said, I'm going to Schulich. I'm taking my laptop. I'm going to sit in the CIBC marketplace in the cafe. And I'm going to build the startup program.
Wow.
And it'll take me maybe about like 7-8 months. But by the time I've started to build it, with no permission really, like no one's giving me permission to do this. I just built it off my LinkedIn profile. I started like interviewing Schulich students, much like you're doing with the podcast,
Right.
interviewing Schulich students, interviewing Schulich alumni who had built their companies. I would go to their office, take a picture with them. write about it on LinkedIn, talk about the whole thing, tag all these key people in the posts, and it's just started to grow, and it just started to grow, and it just started to grow. And then I told people within 7 or 8 months, the dean will come downstairs from his office on the third floor, take me to lunch, demand to know what's going on, and when I
Wow.
explain it to him, he'll hire me. And that is how I got my job at the Schulich School of Business.
Oh,
And
great.
I created it like a startup inside the school. And then over the last number of years, we've gone from like me sitting in the cafe there with my laptop to now we have here where we are today, we have the whole second floor of the executive education tower. And we have a team that works with me on everything. We have student volunteers, there's alumni and founders that are down the hall, venture capitalists coming in. We've like have 200 plus companies that we're working with right now that are
Wow.
Schulich student, alumni, or faculty companies. We're involved in helping in partnership with a really cool professor named Moran Levesque, and we are involved as co-directors to build out the academic side of entrepreneurship. We manage all the work placements for students going to work at startups, work for venture capitalists. We have these 200 companies that we're working with. In total together in the last number of years, they've raised around $70 million plus in venture capital. And we've now started to build accelerators in partnership with governments like the government of India and Startup India. We have our
Wow.
Together Mission program. We have a local accelerator program with a group called Tree Frog here, a program called Jumpstart where we onboard international entrepreneurs and help them set up in the country. We were able to help launch the first startup accelerator in the history of the Jewish community in Ontario that we launched last summer, called High Tech,
Wow.
and project after project and opportunity and people wanting to get involved and more alumni starting companies and showing up, and it's become a really interesting thing very fast.
Oh, I lost you for a moment, really, I guess.
No
Perfect.
problem. I was
Can you
just
hear
saying
me?
it's like really grown. It's Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just saying it's really grown really quickly,
Right.
really fast, and has now become, like you said, it's a startup brand destination within
Right.
the city and within the country. Yeah.
I have a bit, no, a small story. Just want to share without taking much time. Like, I was meeting a founder of Ku. His name is Kulwant, and like right here in Mississauga, in one of the coffee shop. And he told me, "Hey, I know a guy named Chris Carter from Schulich." I said, "Yeah, I know him, but I haven't met him." Dude, you should meet him. He's brilliant. I was like, what? What did I miss out? He was fan of yours. And he said that you should bring him on the podcast. Go there, meet him, email him, do anything but bring him on the podcast. We really want to listen from him. So no, and just went to
Very
the
very kind of him.
yeah. I mean, absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, amazing journey first of all, no, and the kind of work you're doing in, I think it's impeccable. No, and now Schulich is known for its startup, right? People in India, in US, they say that okay, you have very strong startup community, and we keep hearing about this on LinkedIn, on internet. What you guys are doing? And I was like, oh, I don't want to be left aside. Let's connect. Will you? No,
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
glad we got connected, and I'm very like
yeah,
excited about the company that you're building and about the podcast series. And we definitely want to work with you to support you on your own entrepreneurial journey as well too. So I'm really glad that that happened.
absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure a lot of people would pick a lot of insights from this conversation. And yeah, glad to have you.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.